Welcome to Staff Works Explained. If you're here for the first time, please consider subscribing to this channel. In this video, we'll be talking about the extension of the Kenya SGR from Suswa to Kisumu and Malaba, and then linking it to Uganda SGR. We have an announcement that was made in Arusha by President William Ruto that the launch of this extension will be done in March 20th in 2026. An announcement made in Tanzania, Arusha, has revived one of the most consequential infrastructure projects in East Africa. Speaking during the extraordinary summit of the East African Community, the Kenya President William Ruto declared that construction of the standard gauge railway extension linking Kenya and Uganda will be launched on March 20th in Kisumu alongside Uganda President Yoweri Museveni. The project is intended to extend Kenya Railways from Suswa near Naivasha to Kisumu, onward to Malaba, and then Kenya, which is on the Kenya-Uganda border, and eventually connecting to Kampala. It's part of the broader regional railway meant to link the Indian Ocean to the Great Lakes region. But the announcement comes at a sensitive moment. Uganda has recently signaled that it would prioritize linking its railway to Tanzania Central Corridor instead of Kenya Northern Corridor. That possibility has major implications for trade routes, for the port of Mombasa, and also the region logistics. Here we examine what the announcement really means. We look at the structure of the project, why it was stalled for years, what Kenya and Uganda have done so far, how Tanzania has managed to move ahead faster with its own railway program, and whether Kenya's renewed urgency is a strategic response to the shifting regional dynamics. Let's look at the political signal behind this announcement. The setting of the announcement matters. It was made in Arusha, Tanzania, at a summit attended by President of Uganda, Tanzania, and other leaders in the East African community. The context is important. For decades, the main trade route serving Uganda and much of the East Africa has been Northern Corridor, which runs through Kenya, running from the port of Mombasa through Kenya to Uganda and onward to Rwanda, Burundi, and Eastern DRC. But there is another competing route, the Central Corridor, anchored at the Dar es Salaam port in Tanzania. If Uganda ultimately connects its SGR to Tanzania system instead of Kenya, a significant portion of regional cargo could shift away from Mombasa port. That is why the announcement in Arusha carries political meaning. It signals Kenya's intention to complete the railway link and keep Uganda connected to the Northern Corridor. In essence, the announcement is not only about infrastructure, it is also about regional competition for trade routes. Let's look at the structure of the Kenya-Uganda SGR project. The railway is part of the much larger regional transport vision. Kenya's SGR currently runs in two completed phases. We have from Mombasa to Nairobi, which is already running. It was opened in 2017. From Nairobi to Naivasha, Suswa Inland Container Depot. This was also completed in 2019 and it is operational. The remaining sections are Phase 2B, which is from Naivasha to Kisumu, Phase 2C, which is from Kisumu to Malaba on the Kenya-Uganda border. From Malaba, Uganda would extend the railway to Kampala. The Naivasha-Kisumu segment alone is expected to run roughly 269 kilometers, and this includes extensive infrastructure such as tunnels, bridges, stations, logistic terminals. The combined extension from Naivasha to Malaba is estimated to be about $5 billion in cost. The project would also integrate with the revived port at Kisumu on the Lake Victoria, enabling cargo to move across the lake to Uganda as well as Tanzania. Why the project has stalled over the years? Despite repeated announcements over nearly a decade, construction beyond Naivasha has not begun. There are three main reasons. First is financing challenges. The earlier phase of the railway was funded by largely by loans from Chinese lenders and built by China Road and Bridge Corporation. However, China has been reluctant to finance the extension beyond Naivasha. One concern has been the economic viability of the line if Uganda does not build its section at the same time. Another is Kenya's rising public debt, which has made lenders more cautious about funding the large infrastructure projects in the country. Kenya has explored alternatives such as infrastructure bonds and using revenue from railway development levy imposed on imports, but that levy generates far less than what is needed to finance the multi-billion-dollar railway extension. Second reason is the land acquisition and compensation, where large rail corridor require acquiring land along the route and compensating affected communities. That process has been slow and politically sensitive in several counties along the proposed alignment. Third, we have the regional coordination problems. The project only makes sense if both Kenya and Uganda build their section, but for years, each country has effectively waited for the other to commit first. That coordination challenge has delayed progress on both sides of the border. What has Kenya done so far? Kenya has completed several preparatory steps for the extension. These include feasibility study, route design, environment impact assessment, and a partial compensation planning for communities along the railway corridor. However, the most critical steps in major infrastructure project remained unclear. There has been no public confirmation that full financing has been secured, nor has there been clear communication or confirmation of signed construction contract for the Naivasha Kisumu Malaba segment. Without these two elements, financing and procurement, large-scale construction cannot begin. That's why the March 20th launch raises question about whether the project is ready for implementation or whether the event will be largely symbolic. What is the Uganda position? Uganda Railway plan centers on building SGR from Malaba to Kampala, a distance of roughly 270 kilometers. Uganda initially pursued Chinese financing for this project, but negotiations stalled for several years. Part of the hesitation came from uncertainty about whether Kenya would extend its railway to the border. More recently, Uganda has explored alternative financing arrangement and contractors. At the same time, the country has strengthened road links such as Kampala Jinja corridor and improved logistics infrastructure within its territory. Uganda has also maintained dialogue with Tanzania regarding possible railway connection. Let's look at the Tanzania contrasting approach. While Kenya and Uganda have struggled to move forward with their railways extensions, Tanzania has made significant progress with its own SGR. The program has been implemented in phases, linking Dar es Salaam with inland cities such as Dodoma, Tabora, and Mwanza. Passenger services between Dar es Salaam and Dodoma began operating in 2024, and freight operations have started on parts of the line. Several factors explain Tanzania progress. Government adopted a phased construction strategy, secured financing for each segment, before building began, and divided the project among multiple contractors. This approach reduced delay and allowed construction to proceed steadily. In Kenya, in contrast, the Kenya model contrasts this. Kenya has relied heavily on a single financing model for the early phases and has struggled to secure new funding for the extension. We ask ourselves, is Kenya reacting to Uganda's shift toward Tanzania? There are strong indications that Kenya's renewed push for the railway is partly strategic response to regional competition. A large share of cargo handled at Port of Mombasa is transit cargo, which is destined for Uganda and other landlocked countries in East Africa. If Uganda connects primarily to Tanzania railway system, instead, that cargo could gradually shift to the port of Dar es Salaam. That would have serious implications to the Kenya's economy, affecting port revenues, custom collections, trucking industries, and logistics companies that depend on the North Corridor. From that perspective, Kenya's decision to revive the railway extension and expedite it can be understood from that perspective. However, reacting quickly without resolving financing and procurement challenges also carries some form of risk. What are the risks of launching the project before the contract start? Kenya has faced criticism in the past for launching the infrastructure project before financial agreement and contracts are fully secured. One example is the planned Nakuru-Mau Summit Highway from Nairobi, which is an expansion project, which was announced under the PPP model before reaching full financial closure. When large infrastructure projects are launched prematurely, several risks emerge. There's the risk of credibility loss if construction does not begin soon after the launch. There's also the risk of cost escalation because delays between announcement and actual construction can increase project costs. Perhaps most importantly, contractors cannot mobilize equipment and labor unless financing is guaranteed. What are the real costs, benefits, and risks of such an announcement? If successfully completed, the SGR extension could deliver important benefits. It would reduce transport costs between Kenya and Uganda, shorten freight transit times, and strengthen regional trade integration. It could also boost economic activity in Western Kenya and increase cargo volumes handled at the port of Kisumu. But the project also carries significant cost and risks. The extension from Naivasha to Malaba is expected to cost several billions dollars. That level of investments requires strong freight demand to justify the expenditure. If regional cargo volumes do not grow as expected, the railway could face operational losses similar to those experienced in the early years of Kenya's existing SGR. In conclusion, we can say that the March 20 launch announcement is politically significant, but its practical meaning will depend entirely on what follows. At its core, the railway extension is about more than transport infrastructure. It's about the control of East African main trade corridors, and future role of the port of Mombasa in the regional commerce. Kenya is clearly trying to reassure Uganda that the Northern Corridor remains a viable route. But the real test is not the announcement itself, it's whether the financing is secured, contracts are signed, and construction genuinely begins. Tanzania experience shows that disciplined planning, secure financing, and phased implementation can turn ambitious railway plans into reality. If Kenya can achieve the same level of execution, the Northern Corridor may remain the backbone of the regional trade. If not, the balance of the East African logistic network may gradually shift southwards. So thank you for reaching this far. If this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to this channel. You can also hit the notification bell so that whenever you upload a new video, you are notified. You can also leave a comment, share, and like. Thank you, and let's meet in the next one.